Yarny Friends. It is so wonderful to see all you guys again. It has been such a long time since I've recorded anything, and I'm here. There will be an update on my life video coming up soon, but in the meantime, I am just putting up this tutorial, which is long overdue, for this super fun turban style twist kitty cat hat. This pattern is not my original design. This was designed by a wonderful knitting machine designer named Lisa, who I asked her permission to film this up and get it out there for you guys, and she graciously gave her permission. So we are calling this the Lisa hat, or if you're doing search terms, the kitty knitted turban twist, kitty turban twist. I think that's what I'm calling it, kitty turban twist. But Lisa, thank you so much for allowing me to create this video. I hope you all enjoy it. It has kind of a lot of steps, but hang in there. It looks great once it's all finished. It is absolutely one of my favorite hats that I have created. One thing I do need to mention to you guys is that this pattern is knitted, so the hat will be horizontal. So when you're doing your tubes are going to be created the circumference of the hat, not the length of the hat this way. So keep that in mind. And also for this pattern, you do need to have either a 46 or a 48 needle machine and a 22 needle machine, because the way this is constructed, you have your larger tube here that is created on the 46 or the 48 needle. I have a 46 needle, my Addi, and then this panel here is created on the 22 needle machine. So it's two panels, the exact same row counts, that are stitched together here with this twist created in the front as you're stitching. So keep that in mind. You do need both machines for this project. I don't think that there's a way around that because you do need a skinnier and a thicker tube to create this hat. But this hat is wonderful. I love the design. I hope you have just as much fun watching this tutorial as I had creating this tutorial. Can't wait to get caught up with everybody. I'm so excited to be back in the thick of it. 2023, here we go. And I am so excited to start creating videos for you guys again. So, all right, we'll talk to you soon. Without further ado, enjoy the hat and enjoy the tutorial. Bye, guys. So to get started on this tutorial for the kitty cat hat, what we're gonna do is we're gonna need some waste yarn. We're gonna need the yarn that you're working with. Today I am working with I Love This yarn in Stonewash, and the color is Coraline. And I'm using a yarn tensioner as well. I'll put the link to this in the description, so if you want to get one for yourself, you can. You're also gonna need a yarn needle and a crochet hook. So to get started, I'm going to cast on with my waste yarn. I usually cast on about 7 rows of waste yarn, but anywhere between 5 and 10 rows will do. My black pins there. Now I always start after the black pins. That's just a personal preference thing. If you always start on the first pin, that's perfectly fine. I just find this a little bit easier for me for some reason. So don't be alarmed if I'm starting on a different pin than you. And you're gonna just cast on your waste yarn as normal. And then go ahead and crank out how many rows of waste yarn that you're planning on doing, and then stop back at the same pin that you started turning on, and I will meet you there. All right, I have finished up with my waste yarn here. I'm gonna go ahead and cut my waste yarn end. Drop that right in the middle there. Grab the yarn color that I'm working and pull out some yarn. I'm gonna drop that on the ground. Put the yarn tail right in between the same 2 needles that I just dropped my previous yarn. Put my yarn tensioner in and put it through the threader. Don't forget to reset your counter so you get a good row count. Now I am going to make my hat 90 rows. I have a large head, and so 90 rows seems to be a good size for me. If you have a smaller head, you might want to try 85 rows. But for me, 90 rows seems to make a good fit for me, so that is what I'm doing. And we're going to be making 2 panels exactly the same. One of them is just going to be on your 46 or 48 needle machine, and the second one is going to be on your 22 needle machine. So I'm going to go ahead and get my 90 rows knocked out, and I will meet you at the end. Alright, so I'm on my second to last row here. I'm just going to finish this up. And there's the end of my row. My counter says 90, so I am going to cut my yarn here and put it into the middle. Grab my waist yarn again, put that into the middle. Close my carriage there, and go ahead and crank out my last few rows of waist yarn. And then when I am done with this, I'm going to do the exact same thing, just on my 22 needle machine. So to make this hat, you need to have 2 panels of 90 rows, or 85 or less if you choose to make a smaller size. And remember, your row counts determine the circumference that it'll go around your head, not the length of the hat. So that's a little bit different than when you usually make hats. This is going to be the circumference, not the length. So I have my waist yarn, clip my tail here, pop that in the middle. And I'm just going to keep cranking until this panel falls off of my machine. All right, give that a little stretch. And that is, whoop, drop my tension ring. That's my first panel done. So I'm going to go ahead and make the exact same panel on my 22 needle machine. And then I'll meet you back here to show you what we're doing with our ends and how we're assembling our hat. All right, I'm gonna show you guys now how to go ahead and close your tubes, because that's the next step. So the way that I do it is with a crochet hook, and I keep my tails off to one side, and then I kind of look at where those stitches are right here. And then to make sure that I have the same closure without twisting on the other side of the tube, I just kind of pinch all the way down, so I know for a fact that these two are going to be the same down here on this end. And then I poke my hook up through that first stitch there. Get a little closer for you here. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up the stitch right above it and pull that through the stitch that I had my hook in. Then you're going to always go bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, all the way across. So I'm going to pick up this bottom loop here, pull that through, the next loop on the top, pull that through. And if you have a hard time seeing your stitches, it really helps to use a yarn that is in strong contrast to your waist yarn, or excuse me, your working yarn. So don't pick waist yarn that is a close color to the yarn that you're using on your piece. It'll make it a lot easier for you to see the stitches that you need to pick up and to go all the way across. So I'm going to keep picking up these stitches, bottom, top, and just picking them up and pulling them through the loop on my hook. And then I'll meet you down at the end here because it's a little bit fiddly over there. All right, so we're nearing the end of the tube. It helps so that you don't lose the stitches here. These last two are the hardest ones to see and pick up. If you just kind of tug on your tails as you're going and making sure that you are able to see all of the stitches along. So I'm going to do my last couple of stitches here. I have this one here. I'm going to pick that one up. and this one up top right here. I'm going to pick that one up. And there's still one live stitch left, and it will be the stitch that your waist yarn is coming out of. If you can see that there. Make sure you don't miss that stitch or you will get unraveling. Just make sure you have your last stitch. Pull that through. And then to tie this off, just take your tail of your working yarn over, and pull through that loop. And you can just pull it all the way through. And that is not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and take my waist yarn out and close up the rest of my tubes, and then I will show you more on assembly. So get all your tubes closed. Okay, so I have my 2 tubes here. My ends are all closed off. And what I've done is I've just taken it and folded it over one time, both of my tubes here. And I'm going to grab a stitch marker, and I'm going to go ahead and pinch this and see kind of where that middle stitch is right there. And I'm just going to put a stitch marker right there because I'm looking for the center of my my fold, because that's where we're going to put our twist. And so I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Look sort of for that center stitch and put a stitch marker there. So that is where my twist is going to happen. And so the next step is to lay this out flat, just like that. Kind of get these out of the way there. Which, if you're interested in these stitch markers, check out yarnatplay.com. I have them for sale there. And so now that we have our tubes laid out here, and don't be afraid if this one, you know, you might have some length variations because our machines stitch things up slightly differently. It's the same amount of rows, it'll still fit correctly, okay? What I'm going to do is, because I want there to be a twist, and this is going to be, the bottom of the hat is where the skinnier tube goes. I'm going to go ahead and fold this just like that. So I know where that's supposed to go. And then I'm going to take this stitch marker out, pinching the stitch that I'm taking it out of so I don't lose track of it. All right. And I'm just going to kind of track down halfway in that same kind of row of stitches across till I get to about the halfway point, which is going to be about here. And I'm going to pop that stitch marker back in. And that is approximately where I want these two to line up. So, pull this back so you can see better. So this is what's going to create the twist for the top. And you can see it folds down because it's, you know, it's twisted, it's folded. I kind of try to make it go not quite a complete right angle, but pretty close, keeping that kitty in the middle. And then what you can do once you have that kind of laid out, so I'm actually going to, you can grab different stitch markers if you don't want to take these out and reuse these same ones, but I'm going to take these out because I'm not going to shift my piece around. I'm going to put those stitch markers right on either side here. So that way I know where I need to stop stitching just regularly down the seams like I would, and instead I need to start stitching into these top stitches to join it here. Does that make sense? Because what we're going to do is we're going to mattress stitch join along these seams to get them to go together. But when we get to these points where we have the fold, we're going to start stitching the same spot on the top because this is straight, it's not being twisted. But what we're going to do is we're going to stitch down the length of this fold, and that's what gives us the turban twist in the front. And then when we get to the other stitch marker over here, we're going to continue back up with our mattress stitch just like we did on this side. And that's what's going to give us our twist. I hope that all made sense. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go ahead and take this stitch marker out, and I'm actually going to pinch this and put it through both of my things, kind of joining them together. So now the stitch marker is going through both pieces of fabric here. And I'm going to take this one out and do the same thing on the other side. Now this does not need to be exact precise. Close is good. But I will show you how you can kind of, if you have more stitches on one side or the other on either one of these sides that we're going to do, I'll show you how to correct for that so you wind up ending in the same spot. All right, so now we're ready to get stitching. And to do that, you're going to need a yarn needle and a good length of yarn. You want it to be at least as long as the length of your tube. I would say, for me, I would double it approximately. I just always prefer to have too much rather than too little yarn when I am sewing in, because I hate having to add in yarn when I'm in the middle of a seam. So thread your yarn needle. And you can pin this however you want, whatever makes the most sense for you. This is just how I do it. That makes it work well for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to one of my ends. And I'm going to look for V's on the seam here that point down. That always makes mattress stitch easier for me when I work into and pick up the bars between seams at the bottom of the V rather than the top of the V. So I have 2 rows here where I have the bottom of my V's. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and tie my yarn in by going through the bottom 2 stitches at the bottom of the piece, and then tie this into a little double knot. Make sure you leave a tail long enough to weave in. All right. Now I'm gonna poke my yarn in through here and just come up at the bottom of the V on that side so that my yarn is in the correct place to start mattress stitching. Just like that. And to mattress stitch, you want to pick up 2 bars on one side, 2 bars on the other. And when I say bar, I mean you poke into the middle of a V and you pick up that bar that goes between the V's. I'm going to assume you have some sort of basic working knowledge of mattress stitch, but that is the basic idea, okay? So, sorry, I got some like weird shadowing going on here. Let's try that, see if that's better. So I'm going to poke into the bottom of that V, pick up 2 bars, and pull through. And then go back to where your yarn is coming out of over here on this side. You always poke into the same stitch where your yarn is coming out of from the previous side. Pick up the next 2 bars on that side and pull through. And then look for where your yarn is coming out of on this side. Poke it in, pick up 2 bars. And really the only major trick with mattress stitch is just making sure that you don't accidentally poke into a different row. Always look where your yarn's coming out of and pull back into the exact same stitch. And you should not have any issues with your piece twisting or anything like that. And this is how we're going to ultimately close the top of the hat as well. But right now we're just working on the twist at the bottom, getting the hardest part done first so it's out of the way. And the fun part about mattress stitch is that when you get a few stitches down, you pinch the top and then you just pull it and it brings it together. And so it looks like it's not even joined. It's really nice. So I'm going to mattress stitch down until I get to my stitch marker here, and then I'll show you how we kind of go across the top. Okay, so I'm getting close to my stitch marker here. I'm actually going to pop the stitch marker out just of one side because it was causing me to have a twist in where I was stitching up, and I don't want that. So I want to make sure that I keep my same row. So I'm just going to pop that out. I'm still know exactly where I'm going right here. So I'm just going to do my last few stitches here. And one more set. All right. Now that we've gotten this far, give your yarn a tug and make sure that while you're doing mattress stitch, that once you have it snug down, you always give it a stretch. Otherwise you would run the risk of having like a tight strip where you joined when you're wearing your hat, and nobody wants that. So here I am, and I want to start working into this ridge, which there are no specific rows here, so that's a little tricky, but that's where I'm going to be working from now on. And the best way that I can really say to do it is just kind of know where your fold is and just sort of poke your yarn through, pick up a few bars on this side, going in between the fabric still of this first layer, okay? And then pick up 2 bars on the other side like you would, going down that same row like regular mattress stitch. And then I'm still going to look at where my yarn poked out here, and I'm going to pick up a few bars here across the top. So I'm picking up actual stitches, not the V in between the stitches, or the bar in between the V's, sorry. And I'm going to stitch across. Give that a little bit of a tug there and a stretch to make sure, and I'm going to take my stitch marker out now, to make sure that my join is looking okay, and it seems to be looking just fine here. And then you just keep doing this, just kind of keeping that fold in place, right? And just kind of picking up a few bars through the fabric across this strip here, and then picking up your 2 bars in your regular row on the other side. It probably seems more complicated and intimidating than it actually is. Once you're doing it, it's really not too difficult. It's just instead of picking up specific bars in between V's, you're just picking up the tops of a few stitches and then going across. And it's pretty easy to kind of gauge how many bars you need to pick up, because you don't have to pick up the exact same number of, stitches here on this side every time. It'll look different depending on where you are in the fabric. Like here, I'm kind of poked through a bunch of stuff there, but that's okay because it's approximately the same length of fabric that I'm picking up on the other side when I pick up the 2 bars. And that's kind of what you're going for. It's less what specifically you're picking up and more the length of what it is that you're picking up. So I'm going to give this another tug while pinching to make sure that it's looking correct. And I can show you here how this is looking. Make sure I have my fold there. So this is what it's going to look like. And this is how it's looking here. So there isn't any weird clumping or bunching. I'm maintaining the exact same row up top here. So there isn't any twisting in the fabric on the top of the hat. It's just giving this nice little kind of turban twist. So I'm going to keep going down until I get to the stitch marker, and then I'll help you figure out how to get picked back up over here and down the other side. All right, so I'm very nearly at my end here. I'm going to go ahead and snug these few stitches down. And then when I come over back here, what I'm looking for on my end is I'm going to start picking up bars again in a row that is on the end that has V's pointing down towards where I'm working. So that's the row that I want to identify to get back into, which is right where my stitch marker happens to be poking in through. So this is the row that I want to start picking up stitches. So once I get past my stitch marker here, I'm going to start picking up 2 bars in that row again. So I'm just a few stitches away from that. I'm going to keep going along my edge here. I'm actually going to take my stitch marker out of this side because it's making it a little bit difficult for me to see. There we go. I'm probably going to do, let's see, where am I at with my fold? I'm right about at the end. I will go ahead. My yarn is coming out right here, if you can see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go underneath this last one here, because this is the row that I want to start working into again. So I'll go in under and come up underneath a bar right there in the row that I want to be going into. And that should get me pretty squared away to just start picking back up with regular mattress stitch. Now I hope that that all made sense and was simple enough for you to follow. I'm just doing regular mattress stitch here again, kind of getting through this turn. And then I will give it a tug and we will see how it turned out. All right, let's give this a tug. And that looks pretty good to me. You have a nice little twist for the turban top. And now we're just going to continue to do our mattress stitch join down to the end. Now, if for some reason your row counts differ, because we didn't like do exact rows all the way down with like picking up bars, we had this kind of bit in the middle here. Sorry, I was doing that off camera. If you have are struggling because you have different row counts on either side and you don't end on the same row, you can always just work a couple stitches back and adjust, picking up 1 bar or 2 depending on which one is longer and where you need to kind of compensate so that you end in the same spot. And I will show you how I tie off on the end here, and then we'll get into our next set of assembly. All right, so I'm nearing the end, and just so you know, I did do some adjusting and what I was picking up here to make sure that it was going to look right when I got to the end. They were going to be even. So what I did, this side had more stitches than this side did. So for a couple of stitches in there, I just picked up 2 bars on this side and only 1 on this side, and that kind of evened things out so that my ends are the same amount of stitches to the end. So I'm just going to do my last couple of sets of stitches here. And then we'll get this tied off. These are my last 2 bars I'm going under over here. And then my last 2 bars that I'm going under over on this side. I'm going to give that a tug and a stretch. Don't forget to do that. Make sure that you don't have any tightness across your seam. And then when I get to my end here, what I usually do is I just go underneath the top set of stitches here, which got a little tight on this end. But I go under there, get this tail out of the way. I wouldn't trim your tails, and I'll show you why here in a minute. If you already did, that's fine, but I don't usually trim my tails. So then I go underneath these 2 stitches on the side, on the top edge, that bar, and then I loop through doing that exact same thing just a couple of times so that this has a nice snug and even end, just like that. And then what I usually do to tie off is I actually trim this shorter here. I actually just do a double knot with my yarn tail from when I did my end. Just like that. And then I will go ahead and weave in my ends. And that is the twist done. So we have our turban twist done. And now all we need to do is go along and stitch our back seams together. And then once we have our back seams together, we'll fold our hat out like this. And then we will mattress stitch the top seam here so that that back seam is in the back. Our turban twist is in the front. And then we'll make our little cat ears. So we are getting close to being done. And the hardest part is done. The turban twist is done. That's the most difficult part. If you can make it through that, you can do the rest of this hat, no problem. So I will go ahead and show you how to get started on seaming this back together. And you can do this running stitch, you can do this mattress stitch. I just do it in a whip stitch because I feel like there's a seam there anyways. So it's not really a huge deal to me if I just whip stitch it together. I just prefer that for the back for some reason. I don't know why. That's just my preference. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle. And start at one of your ends. I don't think it really matters whether you go top down or bottom down. You're still just doing stitching. So I'm going to go through a couple of loops here on the bottom, just like I did the other side when I was tying in my yarn. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do a double knot to secure these edges together and to secure the yarn in place. And then get that tail out of there. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going up and through. Get that straight there. Sorry, I want my tails to kind of go into the whip stitch as I go. You don't have to do it that way, but that's how I'm going to do it. And so then I just pick up the next set of bars on this side, and the next set of bars on this side, and pull through. And with whip stitch, you just go bottom top, all the way down this back seam. And I'll make a little loop on there, and you don't have to snug down. If you're whip stitching, you don't have to do it super tight because you don't want to have like a weird pucker. You just do it to the tension of the yarn around it, all the way down your back edge of your hat, and that'll get it closed off. See how it's going there? Just whip stitch together, not super tight so it doesn't pucker, just nice and closed all the way down. Okay, so as you can see here, I finished whip stitching the back of the hat together. You will have a seam, but I don't find that to be a problem because you're clearly never going to wear this hat backwards or have an issue with knowing where the front is. If you don't want to have that seam, you can graft your panels together. I am just not bothered by the seam, so I don't worry about it. But if that's your preference, you can definitely do that as well. But that is the end of this seam. Now I took my tails and I wove them back through where I had stitched and then just pulled them through so they're hidden inside the hat now. So the last thing that we need to do is sew up the top of our hat and then make our ears right here. So go ahead and grab yourself a nice long length of yarn because we can use this one length of yarn to sew up the top and to do our ear stitches. Thread your yarn needle. It's going to give me troubles. There we go. And then we are going to be mattress stitching these panels together. I'm sorry, my camera has a shadow. Let me see if I can fix that for you in a minute. All right, I'm not really sure if that helped very much, but we tried. I apologize if the camera shadow is causing any issues for you. We'll do our best to work around it. So I'm going to have my hat folded exactly how I want it across the top here with my center seam right in the back and this hitting right in the front here. And then I'm going to just actually turn this out a little bit because this is going to be the inside of an ear. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up 2 loops from any row on the inside of the hat there, since this will be hidden on the inside of the hat. I'm just going to do my double knot on those 2 bars right there of that stitch. Tuck that inside. All right. Now I have my yarn here, and I'm just gonna poke right up in the corner, coming up in the middle of a stitch right over here. And that should be pretty close to, if not my corner exactly. There's that. Yep, pretty close to my corner right there. So I'll just bump this over 1 stitch to make it sure it's coming out of the rows that I want to work into. Now I have 2 stitches here on my end, right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up the next bar. I'm going to jump over this bar here because this is yarn is coming out from right there. So I'm going to pretend that I just went through that bar. So I'm going to pick up the stitch right behind it there. And don't tighten this all down right away. And then I'm going to go back to where my yarn was originally coming out of. I'm going to pick up the next 2 bars like I would for the mattress stitch that we did before. And look back over to this side. Where is your yarn coming out of the stitch on this side? Pick up 2 bars from the other side and pull through. Now since we are mattress stitching down the same row, your V's are going to be going in different directions, but that's okay. Because we are just closing up this top, and since the row loops all the way around the hat, your V's aren't going to be pointing in the same direction. So make sure you're working into that top row of where your hat comes together and just mattress stitch all the way down the length of the hat, just like that. I'm going to give this a little tug to start to close this up. You can see how it's coming together and it just looks like another knit stitch on top there. And continue doing that all the way down until you get to the end. When you get to this part, it's a little bit trickier. I'll show you what I do in here to get over that seam. But for the meantime, just keep working your mattress stitch down. Okay, so I've gotten my mattress stitch done along the length here. And I'm coming right into where I have my knots that I knotted off and sewn back in. And so I'll just show you how I get through this part. You can do however you choose to. But this is how I do it. So I have, this is where my yarn's coming out of, and the next part is a stitch where it's tied off. So I'm going to poke in there, and I'm actually just going to poke through where my knots are and pull that through. Just like that. And then I'm going to keep going on this side, picking up my next 2 bars. Sorry, my angle of my camera and where my hands are makes it a little tricky for me to see. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing that I just did, only I'm going to go through where my knots are there and come up through my next stitches, but when I come to this side, I want to make sure that the row that I'm coming in out of this side is the same one that I'm stitching along here. So just trace your finger along and make sure, yep, because I was going to come up in the wrong row. Make sure that you come up in the correct row that you are working your mattress stitch in so you don't get any twisting. And I should be good now. Give that a little tug. To just go ahead and finish mattress stitching this all the way to the end as I normally would. So I'm going to keep picking up my 2 bars all the way to the end, and I will see you at the end. All right, so I'm very nearly at the end of my mattress stitches here. I just wanted to show you that it can get a little bit cumbersome and tight when you're finishing off these last stitches. So don't pull your yarn tight when you're getting near the end. Just keeping it loose until you have all your yarn picked up that you want will help you be able to see the bars that you're picking up. Help make sure that you're not getting any twisting happening, and it'll just help everything be much clearer. So going in, 2 bars there, and then this should be my last couple of bars that I'm picking up here. It looks like there's a 3rd one there, so I'm just going to pick up the last 3 there. And then we're going to go ahead and give this a tug down to make that even all the way across. Tighten up that mattress stitch. And there's the closure for the top of our hat. I think that looks pretty nice. No obvious seaming, things like that. So what we're going to do now is we're not going to tie off because we still need to make the cat ears. Now, in my kitty cat hat tutorial that I made for that child size hat, I just did a straight running stitch across for the ears, which you can definitely do. That would work just fine. I usually measure where my ears are going just by using my fingers to kind of form a triangle. But for today, I don't think that I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to poke my needle right back in to the corner of my ear there, right into the inside of the hat. I'm still going to use my fingers to kind of make that triangle shape where I want it right here to kind of keep that edge. And then I'm going to poke right up, right next to my finger. Get that all poked through there. Make sure you keep your point. You don't want to pucker your point. You don't want to have a kitty cat ear with puckered tops, okay? And then what I'm actually going to do, instead of doing a full running stitch across, I have about 1.5 inches there. I'm going to make just a single stitch to the other side, and it'll come up on my fingers on the other side there, you see? So that should be pretty close to straight across. And I'm just going to do a big stitch looped around a few times here. So look over on the other side, and then you want it to be about the same width. And then you want to make sure that your needle comes up in the exact same spot that your yarn came out of before. And don't tie this super tight, just give it a little bit of a snug down. You want it to have some definition there, but you don't want it to make like a big pucker. So just give that a little snug down until you feel you have the right tension that you're working with. And then just run that stitch through a few times, making sure that on either side you're coming up in the exact same place with your yarn every time. And it'll just give you one big kind of running stitch to keep those ears kind of in an ear shape. I'm going to do one more, I think. just like that. And then I'm gonna come through the front to finish that off. So it's gonna look like that. You'll just have one stitch in the corner that's going in an opposite direction just to kind of form that ear there. Like I said, if you want to do a full running stitch across to really make those ears super defined, you absolutely can do that. I'm just not doing it on this hat. And they're both fine techniques, but that's just what I'm doing this time. So I'm going to poke my needle down through kind of to the inside here. And I want it to come up. My hand is inside the hat here because I'm feeling for my needle because I want to be able to pinch it on the inside of the hat. Turn the hat inside out. And then I'm just going to do a French knot to tie that down inside the hat. Trim my yarn relatively short because I'm just going to tuck that tail up into the ear. And that side's done. So we just need to do one more stitch over here just like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my hat inside out. You can see where we had our yarn joining here from when we started doing our mattress stitch. I'm just going to trim that nice and short so it'll tuck right into the ear so you don't have to weave in ends later. Sorry, I did that off camera. My apologies. So I got a short tail there. My hands are much more extended out from me than I normally do, so that's trying to compensate for that camera shadow, so I apologize for that. Lost track of where I was on my viewfinder. I'm just going to tie in my yarn here, just like I did before, with a little double knot that can be easily tucked into the ear, just like that. Trim that a little bit shorter there. All right, now go ahead and flip your hat back right side out. And then you're going to do the same thing that you did on this side. Kind of find your angle and where you want it to go with your fingers, what you want the defined triangle to look like here. And then your fingers on either side will kind of hold that angle for you. And then I'm going to come up, since my yarn is on the inside of my hat, reach into the inside of the hat, poke your needle up, and try and make it so it's going to be relatively the same distance, so it's pretty central and about the same length as a stitch that you did on the other side. And it's coming up right on top of my fingers here. So it should be, excuse me, about my camera, should be straight. And then look for a space on this side, bring it up right in the exact same spot. And that's how you're going to finish off these ears, just running that stitch through a few times to give it that definition. And then you should be done with your hat. And you can go ahead and tie off your ends, just like you did with the other ear, and tucking those tails up into the ear so you don't have to worry about weaving in extra ends. There we go. I think one more pass through should about do it. There. Let me see. My ears look slightly uneven. This one looks a little bit higher than this one does. So I might take this out and just scooch it up a little bit higher. But you understand how to tie it in. If you have that, it's very simple to pull these out since it's just a really big running stitch. You just unthread your needle and just pull the stitches out. And you can adjust if you need to. If I had been measuring correctly, what I could have done is I could have looked at the row that I was on here and gone, oh, I need my yarn to be coming out of the same row on the other side. So that's a tip that I did not just do. So do as I say, not as I do, and that should give you a nice even ears. So that is pretty much it for this. I will go ahead and finish this up, get that corrected, and then we will wrap this up. All right, there you have it, friends. That is our hat completed. I did go back and correct this so it is nice and even now. So just cross your finger over so that you make sure that your lines match up as to where you're getting these stitches in. Don't make my mistake. But this is the finished hat. So when you put it on, obviously the ears pop out. That beautiful twist is in the front. That is how that lays flat. Get a close up there of where you went across the top, and it looks very nice. And then this is the seaming on the back. There is a seam. If you want to close your tubes differently than I did, you can, but this hat so very obviously has a front and a back that a seam on the back just doesn't bother me. So that is what our back seam looks like. Once we got this all done and whip stitched together, that is the finished product for the seam on the back. And that is our completed hat. All right, you guys, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I hope you liked this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Go ahead and comment below if it was, or if you need some help troubleshooting. I will do my best to help you with that if I can. But in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more good tutorials coming up, crochet and knitted machine. And I will be talking to you guys all again very soon. All right, bye guys.